All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Robert Rosine from Waterstone Engineering, and so what we're going to do today is review the phase two of the Green Infrastructure BMP Design Standards, which is essentially a library, if you will, of relatively simple green infrastructure designs that are sort of intended to be off the shelf. Things that a road agent or a highway superintendent or a fairly simple drainage infrastructure elements that don't necessarily require heavy duty engineering that could be easily implemented. Um, so with that, um, our project team is Allison Dixon and Courtney Morehouse from Berkshire Regional. We have Patty Gambarini and Laura Bandera from Pioneer Valley, myself, and Connie Porter, who does a lot of our graphics. Um, what we're going to do today is it's going to be roughly a 60 to 90-minute presentation, approximately, which will include approximately a 20-minute group exercise. And depending on the level of participation and all of that, how much coffee I've drank, we'll be out of here in an hour and a half to 2 hours. Um, and um, and with that, I'd like to ask for you, please, to feel free to ask questions as we go. I know it's a busy time of year for everybody, and a lot of us are looking at the end of our fiscal years. Um, so, but I often find that questions as we go are very helpful for folks, and chances are, if you've got a question, that others are thinking the same, and so feel free to speak up, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat, and we can go with that. With that, the goals of the Green Infrastructure BMP Library are to supplement the upcoming Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. I realize we've been saying the upcoming Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook for a very long time now. It feels like it's been, I thought that was coming out in 2024. Um, I know, you know, Allison, actually, it's worthwhile mentioning the reason Patty is not here today, and it may be a competing thing for others as well, is that there is DEP is hosting another Stormwater Advisory Committee meeting today, of which I'm on that committee, and it is supporting the Mass Stormwater Handbook. So that may be there may be a conflict with some folks for that. Uh, but that said, so the intent of this the library is to provide municipalities a set of readily implementable stormwater BMP designs that have been optimized for nutrient removal, size, and ease of maintenance. Um, and that we're providing biofiltration and infiltration BMP designs that can essentially be pulled from off the shelf, um, and that they're easily implementable both for retrofits in capital improvement projects as a matter of routine. And as every good engineer would say, and as my professional licensing and insurance would have me say, this method does not replace the need for design by a qualified professional engineer, and is intended to be used as a tool to supplement stormwater designs for use in complying with requirements for the MS4. And an understanding of design principles of stormwater management is critical and can be found in the Mass Stormwater Handbook. Okay, so what you'll see in the library is 10 standardized BMP design templates. And I'll go through these, and what they include are elements for different catchment areas, for different sizes, tables of the BMP dimensions, um, and information about the BMP performance for removal of contaminants, things like nitrogen and phosphorus, estimated costs of constructions, And then it's important to understand all of this stuff comes out of the Stormwater Center BMP performance calculator, which is for those of you who are deep into the MS4 permit, you'll see that this is one of the resources that the MS4 permit offers. That and the BMP performance curves. We talked about pre-treatment in there, online versus offline systems, and then different soil types, from the sandy soils to the D soils. And we'll get into all of that. So we have the first phase of this library where we did the first 5 BMPs was done in 2023. Now we're doing the next 5 BMPs here in 2026. And the BMPs that we're talking about include on the left a grassed bioswale, so a very simple design, essentially something designed that's intended to go in the right of way. And so this would be just a depression on the edge of the road. And depending on the level of intensity of the need for pretreatment, et cetera, you may or may not have pretreatment in there. We're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about trash and debris loads and pretreatment and operations and maintenance. The center one is an infiltration trench and pretreatment. So this is again intended for sort of a right of way. And what that just looks like is a normal catch basin. But what you have below ground here is a pre-treatment system that then flows into a subsurface infiltration trench with cleanouts. And we'll get into that. And then on the right-hand side, you see a tree planter or bioretention system. So this is in more of a municipal setting, more of an urban footprint. So these can be designed to manage either road runoff, or in this case, this is really just managing sidewalk runoff. And this is an example of the graphics, give you a sense of what it looks like below ground surface. So you can see in this particular graphic, we have it's being captured in a catch basin where you'd have your removal of trash and debris, and then flowing into this infiltration trench, which is essentially, I'm sorry, a bioswale, which is a bioretention media on the top, and then drainage stone underneath, and it may or may not have under drains connected to existing stormwater infrastructure. Same thing here with the infiltration trench, really almost identical, except that there's no surface water on the top of the system, so everything's just being routed through the pretreatment system into the infiltration trench. And the particular example that you're looking at here is this is an offline system, so there is no existing stormwater infrastructure. So what this is really doing is just managing road runoff, impervious road runoff, and then anything that is not managed in this just continues to run down the road or wherever it goes. And then our tree planters, and then so same thing of all the above. Okay, so then we have 3 other systems: an urban Arlington infiltration trench. So these are being used, we're seeing these used a lot in the eastern part of the state. It's Arlington as in Arlington, Mass. And these are a very simple system. What you see here is an existing catch basin and then a road cut where they're putting an infiltration trench below ground surface. It looks a bit like this. It has a clean out in there, and oftentimes these are done just simply with a hooded outlet. And what's really nice about this is it's part of an existing storm sewer or storm drain network. So anything that is not draining into the infiltration trench just continues on into the existing storm drain network. We have in the center, we have a bioretention with internal storage reservoirs, or ISR. They just look like a normal bioretention, except that they're a bit deeper. and they're saturated in the subsurface. So any of you who might be familiar with the gravel wetland BMPs, we those were developed at the Stormwater Center when I was the director back there. So I was there for about 10 years. And what a gravel wetland is a system that is instead of providing treatment through the media as it flows vertically like you do in a bioretention, a lot of the treatment happens through horizontal flow in a saturated zone. So you have an anaerobic zone where the bacteria are then reducing things like nitrogen and phosphorus. So you have but gravel wetlands in particular are phenomenal treatment systems. They're really the best treatment systems we have. They're very large. And the bioretention with an internal storage reservoir is intended to be sort of a hybrid of the two. It's not as big as a gravel wetland, but provides many of the same benefits of the anaerobic internal storage reservoir. And then on the right, we have these fairly new type of systems that we're seeing. Mostly they come out of the proprietary BMP world, and they are these high flow rate bioretention systems. They don't have to be proprietary, but that is a lot of what we're seeing because of really just the ease of implementation. But the big difference being in a normal bioretention, you might have a media that's 5 to 10 inches per hour at the rate that the water would go through it. Um, but the high flow rate bioretention, some of these medias are approved anywhere between 100, 200, and 300 inches per hour. Um, and why that's important is when you're sizing a system dynamically, it enables you to have a much smaller filter area footprint. And that's really nice in a lot of settings where you have limited space. So the limited space settings might be in a commercial setting or urban environments where you don't have a lot of space to work with. But the other important part to understand is when you have a high flow rate media, it's much more prone to clogging. So they're much more sensitive. So the pre-treatment component of that is very, very important. So what you see here is a pre-treatment system on the front side, a pre-tex system where it's screening out trash and debris before it goes into that. And so often what you'll see in here is you'll have the pre-treatment systems, and then you'll often have a structural underdrain. So what they'll do is they'll put things like, what are these things called? I can't remember, but basically they're like chamber systems. They provide storage underneath the system and provide opportunities for greater opportunities for infiltration. And so the cost is a little bit higher. The functionality is quite a bit higher as well. So they're really great systems. And then we're adding some fairly simple systems here. Rooftop infiltration with pretreatment. So incredibly low cost. So this is an example of a system that's being built as part of a residential subdivision. Every house in this residential subdivision has this, and I don't remember the volume of stone, but let's say it's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 yards of stone. So it's the cost of stone is maybe $300. And then you have somebody to dig a hole and wrap it in fabric. So these systems are often going in for, $2,000, $2,500 per household, and they're managing up to the 5 year, even 10 year storm event in the stone. Very, very simple, very important, and really easy to implement. Same thing with dry wells. And actually, let me go through this. So this would be for a residential setting or something with just clean rooftop runoff. So kind of a very low trash and debris load. And then this system where it's more of a dry well with pretreatment, and this might be intended more for parking lot runoff or where the pretreatment demand, the trash and debris load is going to be a bit higher. So you wouldn't put it straight into a dry well or an infiltration trench. It really requires a higher level of pretreatment on the front end of that. And then lastly, these are retrofits. So gravel wetlands, we spoke about these a little bit earlier. And these systems can be great as a retrofit of existing ponds. So if you think about ponds, ponds have been around forever. If you have locations with dry ponds, you can, a dry pond is off, or ponds are typically designed for flood control, so they're often sized for the 10, 25, even larger. And so you have a large basin, so existing area, and then in the corner of it, where the outlet is, you can retrofit it with these gravel wetlands. Um, Slight modification of the outlet control structure, and now you've changed your pond from having a modest level of water quality treatment to being one of the highest performing systems we've got, which are these gravel wetlands. And they're easiest done for the dry ponds, but if you had a wet pond, you could also do it there. You would just need to fill the wet pond, get rid of that permanent pool of water, which isn't really a big deal other than the fact you need to bring in fill. But in terms of flood storage and water quality treatment, there's nothing lost in all of these. We end up increasing the overall level of performance. Okay, so as we go, so now we're gonna shift into what the library itself looks like. Um, and so give you a sense of how you will use this library and how you would implement it in your kind of day-to-day operations. So this is what the 2023 library looked like. It will have a facelift for the 2026 library. But this is an example of one of the sheets that you would find in there. So this is the urban bioswale or tree planter. So what you see is you have a plan view on the top. Then you have these sections through the middle. Um, and this gives you almost everything you need to build the system. So there are specifications that go with this. There's dimensions, etc. Some of this is followed up in the sizing tables, which I'll show you next. But so as an example, what you see here is it's showing on the top, for example, this would be implemented in a sidewalk. So you'd have a sidewalk cut. You then would have a fence. They don't always have to be fenced, but if you want to do that, you can have a fence around that. It really depends on the depth of the system. And this particular system it has the option of being built in an online or offline configuration. So if you're in an area that has a lot of catch basins or existing stormwater drainage infrastructure, you can have these things under drained and then tap into the existing storm drains, or they can be done where you just have there's a curb cut on the front and then there's a curb cut on the back. So when they fill, they just simply bypass through the system and back out, and then it would flow down to the next storm drain or whatever else is in the roadway. So by not having to tap into existing drainage infrastructure, you're keeping the cost down because you're limiting the amount of pavement and cut and road disturbance that is involved. And then each one of those is paired with a figure you're not intended to read this, but it's a large figure that is your sizing and performance tables. And I'll go through this in a second. But basically, the way you read these is that they're organized across in columns based on your drainage area size. So if you're sizing something for a tenth of an acre, up to half an acre, or you can do multiples of this. You would go into it. You'd locate your particular column based on your impervious area draining to the system, and then you would stop at your soil type, your hydrologic soil group. So a sandy soil type A down to a clay soil type D. And then I'll go into how you're going to read that. But first, I want to talk about the considerations that go into this. And so Actually, I don't like the sequence of that. I'm going to jump into, let's see. Oh yeah, all right, and we're going to do that. We're going to do that next. Never mind. Um, so first I want to talk about considerations that you have to do when you're looking at the sizing of these. And some of you may know this, but it's important to kind of understand the context of why we're doing this and the limitations that municipalities experience for budget and otherwise. So why are we doing this? This is generally speaking, we're doing this for because of MS4 requirements or um, or kind of drivers behind resiliency, meaning we have aging infrastructure, we're experiencing climate change with more intense storms or larger rainfall events. Um, and so under and then we have to balance those things with the fact that we have communities that can't afford any of this stuff, right? So they have demands for permit requirements, they have demands for managing drainage infrastructure that's aging and flooding with budget constraints. So what I'm about to share with you for both precipitation and contamination trends will help you kind of understand how we're balancing some of those. So one of the things I want to show you here is this blue curve here. So this is um, the cumulative annual rainfall runoff. So what does that mean? That means how much rain is falling on a given year, ranked by storm sizes on an impervious area. So I'm not talking about stuff that's falling on grass or a forested area. And the way you read this across the bottom axis, this is runoff depth. So a half an inch of runoff, 1 inch of runoff, inch and a half, all the way up to 2.5 inches. Um, and then on the vertical axis is the cumulative percent. So what I mean by that is if you add every storm throughout the year. So in our climate, we get roughly 45 inches of rain a year. And what I want to show you is that what you see here is that a tenth of an inch storm event. So those are very small storms. The tenth of an inch storms represent about 16% of all the total runoff for a year. So if when I told you 46 inches of rain, um, that about 16% of that 46 inches is from a tenth of an inch. And so what I want to show you that this is the power of this is that at only zero point 0.2 inches, so that's a fairly small storm, zero point 0.2 inches of runoff represents about 30%, or more precisely 29% of the annual runoff. By the time you're at half an inch, you're at over 50%. By the time you're at an inch, you're at almost 80%. So 1 inch of runoff manages almost 80%. Now, why that's important is if you think about how we have done stormwater management historically, we think about the 5 year storm or even the 100 year storm. A 100 year storm is typically over an 8 inch storm. So if you're sizing something for an 8 inch storm, that stormwater BMP is huge, right? 8 inch storm is really big. But if you think about sizing something for a zero point 0.2 inch storm, that's ridiculously small in comparison to the 8 inch storm, but you're representing 30% of your annual runoff. Okay. So I want you to remember that. Now I want you to think about this idea of the first flush contaminant load. So what that idea is this concept that when stormwater runs off, it's dirtiest in the beginning of the storm. And by the time you're at the end of the storm, it's fairly clean. So if you combine those two ideas, that most of our rainfall is happening for fairly small storms, with the idea that the majority of the contaminants are in the beginning of the storm as well. We now know that we can size our BMPs to handle the small storms and capture most of the contaminants. So this is this phenomenal figure that was made by a guy named Masoud Kahanian at UCLA Davis, a wonderful stormwater scientist. And they monitored stuff for Caltrans. And what you can see now, their storms are a bit different than ours because their climate's different. But in their storms, you could see, gosh, look, the storm that happens in the beginning. And these are real pictures. It looked like tar, and by the 30-minute mark, it's starting to clean up, and by the 8-hour mark, it's completely clear, right? So the concept is the same. The time is different. In our environment in the Northeast, where it rains frequently, we get most of our nitrogen and phosphorus come in the very beginning of the storm. Okay. So now let's talk about that from this concept of BMP optimization. Um, and BMP optimization is this idea that basically what I just said, which was that you're going to have a lot more bang for your buck if you're building systems that are sized for smaller storms rather than larger storms. So I want to show you how that actually works out in terms of BMP performance. So the way this works, I'll get into the graphics below, but the way this works, this top curve is very similar to what you see in the new MS4 BMP performance curve. So they have published, the Stormwater Center has published all these BMP performance curves for a BMP, which shows you the amount of removal for a contaminant that you're going to get based on storm size and based on soil type. And when I was back at as the director there, we began this process, and now they've actually been enshrined in the MS4. So this is an example. So what I'm going to show you here is this is an annual pollutant load for a commercial site. And these are this axis is in pounds of nitrogen per acre per year, and this is in capture depth. So how big is your BMP? Now I'm going to show you, we're going to follow this black line. This is for a type A soil. Okay, so here we go. I'm using it on the 0 mark. That is how much pollutant load is going to run off. And we see that in an untreated site, on a commercial site, we would have about 13 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year running off. Okay. Now I want to show you what would happen if we're building a BMP for a 1-inch storm. We would be removing, so that's a typical water quality volume for a 1-inch storm. If you start with a load of 13.3 pounds of per acre, 13 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year, we would be removing, or you can see from this curve that only 0.6 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year are released. That's how much escapes that BMP, which means that you're removing 12.7 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year in a 1-inch storm. So it's a very efficient system. What you can run the efficiency, I don't remember what it is, but that looks like it's over 80% efficiency. Now that's a great idea, but we got to remember what I was telling you about smaller BMPs and first flush. So we're going to think about that. So now let's do an example at a 1/4-inch storm. Okay. And for a 1/4-inch storm, it's less efficient. It's only capturing 10 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. So it's releasing 3.3. So it's not as efficient, right? It's nowhere near as efficient, but let's look at it from an optimized sense. So now I want to go through this example. So now let's say I'm going to build a system that's going to treat a full acre at 1-inch water quality volume. It's going to remove 12.7 pounds, but it's going to cost me, let's say, $40,000 to build this system. Okay. But now, instead of that, I'm going to build 4 systems. Each system is going to be sized for only a 1/4-inch water quality volume. And now I'm going to spread these systems out throughout the city, and each one of them is going to treat 1 acre. So instead of treating 1 acre, I'm now treating 4 acres. They're not being treated as efficiently, but each system is removing 10 pounds. And so now instead of capturing 12.7 pounds like I had previously, I'm now capturing 40 pounds, right? Because I built 4 systems across 4 acres at roughly the same cost, roughly $40,000. So if you think of BMP optimization, it would be for new construction, it makes a lot more sense. You design them for a 1 inch water quality volume. But for a municipality that's strapped for costs, we don't have as much money. We have to figure out how we can retrofit these things most cost effectively. So at the same cost margin, we're essentially getting an extra 27 pounds of nitrogen per year, or we've optimized it for about a 315% increase. Okay. So, whether people realize it or not, it's actually in the MS4. There's a requirement in the MS4 in section 236, which talks about how redevelopment needs to be optimized for nitrogen and phosphorus. And it goes through that description. And I'm going to show you a really quick example. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is an example of a site that was actually built. And we had an area that was, let's see. So we had one system that we sized for a 1/4 inch water quality volume, and it was treating about 4.5 acres. We had another system we designed for 3/4 of an inch of a water quality volume for about 1.6 acres. And we were able to achieve, same example, a 76% nitrogen reduction and a 95% nitrogen reduction for those two systems at a relatively low cost, $34,000, at some really good costs. Um, if you did a lot of this, you'd recognize that nitrogen treatment at a wastewater plant is around, to get down to about somewhere between 4 and 8 milligrams per liter, is costing about $3,000 per pound of nitrogen per year. So when we get below or around $3,000 per pound of nitrogen, we're doing really well. And you can see that this bioswale that was sized for the 1/4 inch water quality volume was down at about $565 per pound, and the installation as a whole was below it, was right around 1,000. So we're doing really well. And these are actually construction costs. These are not planning costs. This was cost to build. Okay. So now we're going to go into the design method. And if anybody has any questions, I know it's a lot of information, but this is the context and sort of the underpinnings for the design library. So the design method, basically, you're going to go into the assessment of the. Actually, I'm going to skip past this. We're going to do it here. You're going to go into the. You're going to go into the evaluation of the location for stormwater management retrofit. Allison, did you have a question? No? Okay. And so to do that, you're going to assess where is this thing going to go, right? Is it in the right of way in a urban, or I'm sorry, in a suburban rural area, so on the edge of the road where we got lots of room, or is it going to be in more of an urban setting, where we have less space to operate and we're probably dealing with a lot of utilities? Um, we need to consider our setbacks for things such as septic systems and drinking water wells, or from resource areas, water bodies. Are we within the 100-foot setback of a protected water area? Are we triggering the Wetland Protection Act? Um, then we need to determine our drainage area, or more precisely, our impervious cover drainage area. Um, and then we would look at our hydrologic soil group, and our seasonal high water table. Sometimes this involves test pitting, but if it's in an area that you work in a lot, it's not always necessary. You can get a fair amount from the NRCS web soil surveys, or if it's in an area you work in a lot, you may know these areas, and then simply you're confirming it during the construction. So it depends, and it really, in most respects, it's going to depend on the complexity of these BMPs. And as I've said before, um, the BMP design library is really intended for relatively simple BMPs that don't require a lot of engineering. If you find yourself in more complex situations, you probably need to get a PE involved and do the more high level evaluation. Then we're going to bump into the selection of design and sizing tables, which I'll go into in a moment. Um, and then as part of that, you're going to evaluate your water quality volume and your BMP optimization. So now you're beginning to balance performance with cost. Do I have a little money to work with, or do I have a lot of money? Do I have some areas that are flooding? Do I have good soils? So I just did a whole bunch of sites for a Mass DOT road, and we had a fair amount of downhill flooding. These were all offline systems. And we were in very good soil. So in some places, it was very easy for me to oversize these systems, and we wanted to do it to try and help the downstream neighbors that were experiencing a fair amount of flooding. And because they're not in online systems, we don't have the opportunity to route them through existing storm drains. Um, and then lastly, pairing our land use um, with pre-treatment and low maintenance design. So essentially, the trash and debris load with our need for maintenance, and we're going to talk a lot about that. So first, I want to go into an example. I'll do this example for you, and then we're going to try to do a group exercise, try and get folks to weigh in here. So I see Jessica and Diane. I'm going to put you on the spot if you're so interested, and if not, that's fine. We'll get out of here a little early. Um, so first one is an example of an urban bioswale retrofit. And so what I want you to think about here is we have imagine a design scenario in an urban environment where we have a two-lane roadway, we have roadside parking, we have sidewalks, we have curbs, gutters, and existing drainage infrastructure. Um, so in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to pick an offline urban bioswale with no underdrain. Um, and so why would I do that? So it's going to be very close to what you see in the bottom of the system here. And the reason why it's going to be offline is because I'm going to try and limit cost. Um, if I don't have a lot of money to spend in this for this particular example, and so so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a curb cut at the front of the system where it's going to allow water to flow into it, and then when the system reaches capacity, it's going to exit through a curb cut at the back of the system, and then it'll just drain right back into the road, and then maybe another 100 feet down, it'll go into an existing catch basin. And I will use I'll have a pre-treatment system ahead of it to capture all the trash and debris. And why the pre-treatment? Well, in an urban setting, we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about this later on when we get into the pre-treatment and O&M on this. But in an urban setting where you can expect a large trash and debris load, and so that we're not overwhelmed by the need for maintenance, we have to have a robust or an appropriately robust pretreatment, a way that doesn't have us dealing with cigarette butts and coffee cups that are in my bioswale, because then I'm just managing it for aesthetics as opposed to for functionality. And I want to be maintaining these things for functionality, like when the water's when the filter media is starting to clog and things like that, or the trash and debris load is gotten high. So that's an example there. And now what I want to show you is how you would use the sizing table for this. So this is an example. You remember that big complicated chart I showed you that had columns of BMP of the drainage area. So this particular one I'm picking for a half acre impervious area, so half acre road runoff. And what that's probably doing, it's a two-lane road, but it's most likely it's crowned in the center. So I'm probably just doing one side of the road, and then oftentimes we have 200 or 300 feet between catch basins. In this particular instance, is going to be for a hydrologic soil group A, so sandy soils. And then, so we have our impervious drainage area. Then the way we read these is you have your BMP sizing. And we're going to talk about that in depth, but I want to go through an example here. But so you have, yeah, there's three elements here. There's your treated area equivalent. So in a 1 inch water quality volume, you're essentially treating the entire impervious area. Um, and then down to different sizing, 3/4 of an inch, half an inch, and so on down the line, and what the treated area equivalent would be, um, what your depth of runoff treated would be. And so, do you remember back to the optimization example? Am I sizing it for a 1 inch water quality volume, or am I sizing it for something less, anywhere from 1 inch all the way down to a tenth of an inch? And then what that corresponding water quality volume will be. So what is the size of the capture volume in that BMP? So you can see for a 1 inch, it's fairly large. I'm talking, 1,600 cubic feet versus maybe only 169 cubic feet. So that's where the sizing element gets in. And we'll go into this. This will all hopefully begin to make sense. So then what this shows you is if I pick something for a 1 inch storm, I'm going to have the length of my bioswale is going to be 180 feet long, which might be just fine if I'm in a rural area that has a plenty of room along the road shoulder. In an urban setting, it's less likely. Down to a tenth of an inch, where I might be able to do this in as short as 18 feet. And then what we've done is we've standardized the width and the depth of these systems. Now, if you wanted to, now we haven't done this in the sizing tables, but you could recalculate this on your own if you said, okay, I'm going to make this 10 feet wide. If it's 10 feet wide, then it's going to be half that distance. Instead of 180 feet, it's going to be 90 feet. Or I want to make the depth of the filter media twice as deep. Now you're changing your volume, and again, you can change your length and all of that. So it enables you to rework those numbers if you want. If you're to heavily rework them, I would recommend that you go get the UNHSC BMP performance calculator. And we don't have time to go in that today, but understand that these numbers are generated from that calculator, and they're from the BMP performance curve and these complex models that have been run that have now standardized outputs. So then the next piece gets into the performance. So what is your removal efficiency, both in terms of percentages and then in terms of what your actual load or volume reduction would be. So again, our 1 inch example, I'm getting essentially 100% removal efficiency for phosphorus, nitrogen, total suspended solids. But then you can see down around the 2/10 of an inch, we're down in the 80% or 90% removal efficiency, which are still very good, and they cost a fraction. And then the last bit, the planning costs. And then planning costs are simply, remember, these are not construction costs. So when it comes out to when you're thinking about bid or actually construction, you need to reassess these numbers. And then these numbers, and by the way, these numbers are going to be updated as part of the 2026 BMP library. And you have a cost to construct in the top row, and then you have unit performance costs. These are a bit more esoteric, but what these are is understand that these are in, say, the costs of pound to remove. So you might remember I told you in that prior example, we were down around £1,000 per pound of nitrogen removed. For the urban bioswale, shows you we are in the at 2/10 of an inch, we're down around, say, 1,700 pounds of nitrogen, $1,700 per pound of nitrogen. And that's because in an urban setting, it's more costly. If I was in a rural setting, these, which was my particular example, that these numbers would be about a third of that. Okay, so now I want to run this example again. So now I'm going to say for this particular BMP in the urban bioswale setting, I'm going to pick 2/10 of an inch. And in that example, I'm going to have a filter surface area that's 180 square feet. Um, my ponding depth is going to be, I think, 8 inches. My length of my BMP is going to be 36 feet by 5 feet wide. And then I'm going to get a 75% volume reduction on an annual basis. I'm going to get about an 80% phosphorus reduction, about a 90% nitrogen reduction, about a 95% TSS reduction, about 100% metals, about 85% bacteria, and so on down the line, all at a cost of about $11,000. Those numbers are going to be a little low. They need to be updated. I just built a whole bunch of these things, and they were coming in not in a rural setting, but they were coming in at around about $23,000 a BMP. That's to build it. That's not police detail and and permitting and that stuff. But um, okay, so I know that's a lot of information. And so now I'm going to put some of you on the spot. If you want to get involved, that's fine. If not, I'll walk through these for you. So the first example that I'd like to talk about, and I just built a whole bunch here, is a right of way for roadways. And so this was on a Mass DOT road in a municipality. So technically, the municipality is responsible for maintaining, or it's in the municipal MS4, but it's on a DOT road. So I don't always know how these things work. I know we had to permit it through the DOT, and I think the DOT is responsible for the maintenance, but the town paid for all of this. I don't know how it works. But what I want you to think about here is we have an urban minor arterial. It's getting roughly 10,000 vehicles a day. It's 35 mile per hour road. We routinely get heavy trucks. We have roughly 85% impervious cover within the roadways, and we're dealing with pavements, sidewalks, driveways, gravel shoulders. Oh yeah, and we're in a type A soil here. So let's talk about this a little bit. So if you think about your potential location, if you're looking at a road like this, where could you build BMPs? Um, I can tell you that what you have on the left-hand side here is, oh, so there's a road crown. So everything on the left-hand side is going into storm drains, and they're untreated, and they're going straight out to ponds that are impaired, and so they're on the impaired list. So they're getting nailed by the MS4. Everything on the right-hand side of the road is untreated and it's running down a long ways, and eventually it'll get to a catch basin or it's flowing over the hillside down people's front yards. So, things that come to mind. Anybody have any ideas on what sort of considerations we would have for where you would put the BMPs, things we would think about here?
Where's the right of way? Like,
Okay, so our right of way it extends about I can't remember if it's 15 feet from, I think it's 15 feet from the edge of the travel way. So travel way being white line. So we have essentially from this white line to almost the mailbox here. That's our right of way.
What about underground utilities?
Exactly. Underground utilities are a huge one to consider. Yep. And we actually, in this case, we have a great survey. We know our utilities are we have some utilities, not a lot. Most of our utilities are on the other side of the road, um, and under the road. So about the only thing we really have is we have water laterals that have all been mapped out. So utilities, that's a good one. Um, so what do you think about a place to build something? Where would you put them?
I've got one more
input thought. It looks like people use that area for parking, whatever system we put in. I guess we should consider
Yes.
how we use it.
Exactly, right. So we don't want to use up the space. So a bioswale is not a good idea here, right? People park here. So that can't happen here. So what would you consider putting in here then? Why don't I go back? I'll go back up. Um, so we have, for example, so here's a bioswale on the left. We have an infiltration trench. And what else we have? We have And we have and we so and then we have another one that would go below. So we only have two that are below ground surface here. We have an infiltration trench on the far left, the urban infiltration trench, and we have and then we have the regular infiltration trench, roadside infiltration. So what do you think?
I'd almost go with infiltration trenches. Do we have the same right of way on the other side of the road, or is it at the sidewalk?
It's under the sidewalk. So we do have the same right of way, but you would have to disturb the sidewalk. So yes, it's the right of way. I can't remember. I think it's 58 feet from edge to edge. You could put a 24-foot roadway in, yada yada, but you'd have to break up sidewalk. So the project cost goes way up.
Yeah. So I'd almost go with maybe that infiltration trench with pretreatment
Yes,
because
exactly. So that picture I showed you is, see where this orange sign is down here? That's where they're building it. That's exactly what we chose. So we did exactly what you just suggested there. So let's get back to it. This one. So the picture I showed you of the urban infiltration trench, that's about 1,000 feet behind me here. And we put one in right here, I think, or maybe it's in front. I can't remember exactly where it is, but I think there's actually two in here. Um, So, piece of cake, right? You have a catch basin with pretreatment that goes in, and we just picked existing ponding areas. Where's the water standing? Um, and then you put everything underground, and then you resurface with gravel and put cleanouts. Um, so yeah, what other thoughts? So let's think about setbacks, septic systems, drinking water wells. Any of that stuff going to come into play here?
Hopefully there's no wells that close. I guess we would have to consider how much contaminants would be going in and how
Yeah,
close the wells
yeah.
are.
Yeah, so I think in this case, everybody's on municipal water, so there shouldn't be a drinking water wells, and they're also on municipal sewer. So no setbacks here. But if we did have it, I honestly can't remember. I think it's 35 feet from a septic system, and I think it's 75 feet from the drinking water wells. Does that sound right? Is that what people remember? It varies. I think that's locally determined, if I remember right, as opposed to state determined. Drainage area, fairly easy to do here. Any thoughts on how we would determine drainage area?
Just pick your two nearest highest points and confirm on maybe a topographic map.
Yeah, yeah.
and then assume
Verify
half
that
the
there's
road.
road crown. Yeah,
Yeah.
Diane?
Yeah, then assume half the road as long as there's a road crown.
Yeah, half the road, exactly. So fairly easy to do here. I don't bother with the pervious areas. So I'm not, if there's lawn or other things like that, I'm not worried about that. We're generally not sizing for that. And they generally um, run off at different rates. So the pavement runs off fast, the gravel will run off fast, the grass takes a while. So you just size it for your impervious area. And I'm treating gravel as essentially compacted areas, so semi-impervious. Yeah. Um, Driveways, those should go in also. Um, okay, soil groups, seasonal high water. Any thoughts on that? Let me ask you, Noel, Diane, if you were working in areas, how well do you know your towns? Do you feel like um, do you know the areas well enough that you could say, oh, this part of town's all this soil type? Or do you feel like you would want to do test pits?
I usually like test pits, honestly, but it depends on where we are too. And because a lot of ours in some areas are urban fill, so it can
Yeah, yeah, that's
definitely vary from like one house to another in some of
yeah.
those locations.
Ooh, urban fill. Yeah, that
So
changes. That can change everything. Yeah,
yeah,
I
so I
agree.
mean it depends, and like we have we can have like the highway department or water department go out and do a test pit if needed. So,
That's great.
I'd rather check unless it's an area that I know is minimally disturbed and we've done a lot of stuff in that area that has good soils.
For sure, it's the
That
it's the
varies.
it's the A standard. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. How about you, Noel?
Yeah, I'm definitely still getting to know Westfield soil types. I've just dug my first set of test pits last week. They went pretty well, and the soil was pretty consistent with what the USDA soil map said.
Yeah, the Web Soil Survey. Have you used those?
Yeah, yep,
They're fantastic. Yeah,
absolutely.
although they will often show just urban fill also
Hmm.
when you get in urban settings, but they're fantastic, and I'm always blown away at how good they are. I mean, maybe not the exact lines, but they have the overall soil types and general thicknesses, and yeah, I'm so this particular site we didn't do any test pits, zero, and they were just beautiful sandy soils. I have another job that everybody screwed up. The contractor didn't call anybody. It was all on fill. Problems everywhere. We should have done some test pits. It's the A standard for sure. Um, I'll tell you something. My feeling about seasonal high water table. I don't always worry as much about seasonal high water table, and if it were because first of all, the idea is seasonal. It should only be up for maybe a month or so. And as long as we're not in the water table routinely, the reason the seasonal high water tables, and I know the permitting entities don't agree with this, but I've been presenting this at annual meetings for years that they need to separate stormwater guidelines from wastewater guidelines. The 3 foot separation comes from wastewater guidelines. I agree. You don't want to put 40 milligrams per liter wastewater nitrogen septic system into groundwater. But how about zero point 0.5, right? That's probably what this road is, zero point 0.5 milligrams per liter. And maybe 1.2. It's not 40, it's not 8. It's and so it's not loaded with calcium. Actually, it can be if it's salted, but wastewater is a whole different deal. So I worry less about the seasonal high for than a lot of places. Although having understanding of it is important, knowing that it's not in the middle of your system, or that the regular high water table is not in the middle of your
That's what I
system.
was gonna say. Like, I'm not so much worried about like the contaminants I mean, I am worried about the contaminants, obviously,
Yeah,
but like if you're putting an infiltration system in the middle of your normal groundwater or very close to it,
it'll
you're
never
gonna end up
drain.
with flooding. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So,
exactly.
I mean, I want to know where that groundwater is.
I agree.
So,
Yeah. And on that note, like having the opportunity to underdrain, it adds expense, but if there's an opportunity, it's a great option. These examples I'm showing you here, there was no opportunity for underdrains. Um, but I might be repeating myself. I apologize if I am, but I remember like the city of Seattle when they first did their standards for rain gardens, they weren't underdrained, and then they found that they had a fair amount of systems that were not draining well. So they make it a routine now to underdrain their systems where possible um, for that reason. Okay, so selection and design of sizing. So then we would need to, you just think about how much money you have and how much space you have. Um, in these were A-type soils. There were some houses that were having some real problems with flooding and others less so. So the ones that were having problems with flooding, I oversized them. It was easy. It didn't cost a lot extra. Um, and then land use. This as a 10,000 vehicle per day. you can expect there's going to be a fair amount of trash and debris on this. Oh, and actually a good anecdote on this was in a lot of cases we were removing existing dry wells. So the DOT had already put in dry wells 10 years before, 20 years before, which worked for a while, but then they clogged. And that's to be expected. I'm not criticizing them, but it just shows we really need pretreatment for long-term functionality. Okay, so let's go into location two. So here's a commercial setting. So thoughts on this? So this is a median, perfect place for a BMP. What comes to mind here?
We
Definitely
definitely,
great spot for a swale, but if it's a large parking lot, we probably have to consider maybe some pre-treatment with all the cars.
Yeah, yeah. Look at all the trash in here. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Great place for a swale. Yeah, yeah. And so you'd have to have curbs. It looks like the left-hand side is not curbed. It looks like the right-hand side is curbed. So to have pretreatment, you generally need curbs. So there's some added expense there.
I can't tell
Uh,
if they're actually curbs though.
yeah,
Like, because they are curbed on both sides, but I don't know how much of a lip it has.
yeah. I can tell you on the right-hand side, that's a full curb. It's a
Okay.
concrete curb. This is
Okay.
in this is in coastal Mass, so they're not worrying about granite curbs here. In your area, do you guys do concrete curbs or granite curb?
It depends.
It
It's a
depends.
cost issue,
Yeah,
and also like there's certain, like if we're doing bioretention or anything, we almost always put granite in,
yeah,
just because they're longer lasting, and if there's a drop in grade, we don't want to chance it with that kind of
yeah.
stuff too.
Diane, remind me which town you're in.
East Hampton.
East Hampton. Yeah. How about you, Noel?
I think she's in Westfield.
In Westfield. Gotcha.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Um, okay. Drainage area considerations, setbacks,
Soils, because
soils.
I don't see
Yeah.
anything about soils there.
And there's
Yeah.
it looks like a light pole.
Light pole. So there's going to be utilities for sure. Absolutely. Utilities are going to be an issue here.
It looks like we have a couple of
Soils.
existing trees too, so we just have to be careful about what we do with the grading and
Right.
things like that.
Right. Exactly. So, working around the existing trees, this can be a great way to marry. I personally love the idea of combining
Yeah.
urban trees with stormwater management. So often you see the thirsty dead trees in the right next to catch basin. So I really like anytime I can work with that. I like that a lot.
And just where
Uh,
the existing drainage system is, like if we'd connect into that or just overflow into the lot.
right, right, right. It looks like there is a they have a they have there must be under drains or at least some storm drain infrastructure because this is this is an overflow down here.
Oh, okay.
It's a beehive drain down there. Okay. All right. So that's great. So let's jump into. So I'm realizing next time I do this, I'm going to sequence it differently. We're going to do that exercise after we do the pretreatment for trash and debris because this and the O&M considerations to me are some of the most powerful things. You guys as working in municipalities, this is the biggest nightmare that you worry about. So I always love these photos because these were done in New York City. New York City has been doing a lot of this green infrastructure for quite some time, and not even because of MS4s. They had combined sewers that they had to develop a long-term control plan for, and they spent so they did some massive planning efforts because they recognized that all if they had to do everything on storm sewer separation, they were going to look at a $5 billion storm sewer operation. storms, long-term control plan for separating storm sewers, $5 billion. So what it did was it sent them into the planning mode for how to get water, keep water out of their combined sewers, and enable them to where they did have, so they had a combination of separating their sewers and then providing treatment for the non-separated. So they did a lot of this. So they learned a lot of lessons that were really good for us. And so this is a perfect example of just being a little short-sighted, right? So not wanting to spend the money on O&M for pretreatment, because some of the pretreatment things, they do add costs. It's going to be $2,000 to $5,000 probably per system for the pretreatment. But look at this. I mean, this is real. Like a gravel lip is not stopping all the trash and debris here. And so it's really important to consider your trash and debris load and what you're dealing with. So low density residential, you're just not dealing with much, right? It's leaves and, generally organics for the most part. Medium density residential, you add that plus a little bit more trash in there, and then on down the line, further and further up this. So, depending on where we are on this, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've worked on projects where we've designed stormwater systems, including pretreatment, where the owner, for a cost savings measure, has eliminated the pretreatment in favor of just like a little gravel entrance or something because it's cheaper, and then it doesn't work. And this is where I think about this. So if you think about the evolution of low impact development, if you think about the analogy of a septic system, in a million years, nobody would consider building a septic system without the tank, right? That the leach field itself could function, for a very, very long time if the tank itself is well maintained. And stormwater infiltration is not a lot different. We have a trash and debris load. And if you think about your bioswale or your subsurface infiltration as being not substantially different than a leach field, as long as you have something that enables you to remove the trash and debris. So this example, there's a pretreatment system here that captures all the trash and debris off the parking lot. And these were some headlines that came out of the New York Times early on, where they would, the city, it's a pollution fighter, but for residents, and it's an eyesore. And why that's important is because in the municipality, you're always playing the game of trying to have, I mean, the taxpayers, if they don't support something, you're not going to get money to do this. So it'd be hard to get support from taxpayers to do stormwater management that looks like this. And I'm not poking fun at it. I've made these mistakes about a million times, and I've just learned from them. And I always like this one is because it's not always aesthetics that you're worrying about. This flooding was simply due to leaf litter out in catch basins. So, and it's in people's houses. So, low maintenance asset management. We need to recognize that most pretreatment are inadequate. Our goals should be to use existing staff and existing equipment. Just use Vector trucks or whatever it is. So whatever we design, it needs to be. We need to plan on having it be maintainable by Vector trucks, and that we want to not have to maintain for aesthetics. So this system is going to have to be maintained weekly, monthly, not because it doesn't function. This system still drains, but it's because it looks terrible. So as an example, we want to be able to use something like a Vector truck where you're only having to get in there every 6 months to 2 years. And so you're using a system that is capturing your trash and debris. So the different types of examples that you have, your low intensity ones, the stone check dams, these might work fine for a rural setting or rural residential setting. But as soon as you get into low and medium intensity, you have to have systems where they're actually capturing debris. And so, like you see things like the Storm Sack or the Rain Guardian. These are good for low intensity where there's a little bit of trash and debris. Um, and like a Rain Guardian does a great job in front of a rain garden, except that it captures the trash on top of it. So if there's a high trash and debris load, at least it's not in your system, but it doesn't look good, right? Um, the good thing about a storm sack is that it's now going below ground. There's not a lot of capacity in here, um, but it's below ground, so it's not an aesthetic problem. And then you get into the medium to high intensity where you have a lot more trash and debris. And these things you can probably you can get down to the 1 or 2 year mark. So Diane, as an example, how often in East Hampton are you maintaining your catch basins? Do you know?
Um, Usually twice a year, once to twice a year.
Oh, wow, you're that
We're
frequent. Okay.
vacuuming, yeah.
Yeah,
And
wow.
some of our buyer retention, we have a couple. We have a pad before it, so they'll vac those out as well.
And they'll back those out as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
like
I've
a
built a lot of bioretention that have not had sufficient. So there are bioretention retrofits that you can do, or I don't mean actually retro. You're not building a bioretention, but a retrofit for O&M that you can do.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we can talk about that.
Yeah, so we have like a sediment pad before with a weir. So they
Okay.
vac those out as
Yeah.
well because they're made out of pavers and they're grouted
Okay.
in, so we don't have to worry about backing up the sand.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah,
So,
that's nice. Yeah, because you can see, so if you think about the O&M, ideally all you're doing is vacuuming, right? And there was a guy, I'm terrible with names, but in one of our advisory group meetings, who said they were doing, God, what was his numbers? They were doing like 20 a day, maybe more. Um, that's impressive. I remember I thought with some of these systems we were down to maybe 6 to 8 a day. So 20 plus a day is really impressive. And that's driving costs way down for you then. So one of the things to know in the with these standards is that we have each BMP comes with its an operations and maintenance checklist. So recommendations on what you're looking at and the frequency and how that should be done. Um, and then the other thing to recognize that is the need for construction and inspection. So when we think about sort of advanced stormwater management, which is what these are, it's not just the designs, it's also building them to make sure that they're done right. And this particular um, photo is an important one because this is an example of the inspection came too late. We were notified by the builder afterwards. So we went in and we inspected. The stone was already down, so we scraped away the stone and we did our infiltration testing on the subgrade, and they had overcompacted it. It didn't drain. So what we had to do was have them, unfortunately, they had to scrape off all the stone and then dig down a foot past the compacted layer and then retest. And the infiltration was fine down here. But why that's important is because had we not done that, the BMP, the infiltration BMP never would have worked, right? So what you will see in this is a construction inspection checklist. They're all fairly easy, but they're things that we can all do. And depending on the level of complexity, um, you'll have pre-construction elements, you'll have excavation elements, you'll have elements of how the structural components are going together. Um, Evaluation of your select material. So what does the stone look like? Is it clean? Filter media specifications, things like that. And then all the construction completion elements. So, sign off and evaluation, all that. And here's an example of a site that was not protected um, during construction, and it actually was not the kiss of death. It was you might even say that maybe they did well by this. I think they could have made it easier on themselves. But regardless, it was a subsurface sand filter. So they could get access to it, and then somebody was just going to have to clean it. And you could see, so this is what was scraped off when I was down there. Was scraped off the surface, and it was basically like a clayey mess. But 3 inches down, there was good clean sand, so they just had to scrape it and do that. So, but in some instances, you don't have that option. So if you haven't adequately protected your infiltration trench, you can literally ruin a brand new system on a big storm. And so you should have fabric inside that catch basin until you have all the vegetative stabilization you need, so that you're not clogging your system, and that you've gone through all of that. So we'll have all these elements here. Um, and I believe the advisory group has gotten an email. I realize everybody's busy, but if you have any feedback on what goes in on the construction inspections, please provide that feedback. Would be very grateful for that. Um, so what else have we got? Okay, so lastly, I want to talk about some resources for you. Um, we have um, the phase one BMP design standards are currently located on the Think Blue Connecticut River website, and we will when this project is complete, we will have a new link that will be both for Pioneer Valley as well as for Berkshire Regional, and that'll have the revised and updated standards. You can also contact me if you'd like access to the CAD files. If you don't want to, if the standards themselves are not sufficient and you want to provide, you want to modify the CAD files and do whatever else you want to do with those. There's also the UNH Stormwater Center. You can get access to the BMP Performance Curve Calculator. I think there's some other links that are out there that are through the MS4 permit. And then, of course, the planning commissions. You can contact them for stormwater support on that. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge our advisory group, both from the Berkshire region and then the Pioneer Valley. And your input has been exceptionally helpful. I'll tell you, over the years, the different designs that I've done, I learned early on that the engineers are very good at solving one problem and creating two. So working with the people who are building these systems and the people who are owning and maintaining these systems help us come up with designs that are practical and feasible and usable and all of that. So we're very grateful for all of that. And then with that, we are done. We are on time, and we have time for questions.
Thank you, Rob. I didn't see any questions pop up into the chat. And I did dig out the setback information for septic and leach fields was 50 feet from septic and 100 feet
And
from
that's the
leach
50 and
field.
100. Okay. Okay. Yeah, for a small lot, that could be a bit of work, but that's also not too uncommon. We often find that we put everything on the other side of the house, but then you may be closest to the neighbor house.
Right. And we will send out a survey following this training. Be grateful for your input on that. And as you know, this is being recorded, so there will be a recording available. It's a really busy time for our DPW, so hopefully they'll be able to catch up with the recording. And we can send out the current link to all the participants as well.
Yeah. And if you have further questions or project ideas that you'd like to reach out to the project team, we'd be more than happy to help. There will be an upcoming training on this sometime in the next couple months that we have not scheduled it yet, but we recognize that fiscal year 2026 is a busy time for a lot of folks. So there may be people that wanted to attend that were not able to. Um, so I'm trying to think, was there anything else? Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to mention that we did not include in this presentation that I'm actually going to scroll through down to right now. And that is in the BMP design standards, we offer three bioretention soil mixes. And now that comes to mind, I wonder if we should try and put a fourth high flow rate media in here. But in either case, there's three that are in there right now, and there is the one that's in the 2008 Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. Um, there's one that I use a lot, which I like a lot better. And then there's one that is for a phosphorus removal soil mix. So in addition of water treatment residuals. Um, and so you can find those in there. Bioretention soil mixes are there's more of those recipes out there than you can find for muffins. I mean, there's so many different styles that are out there. And when I think of the different things that are out there, there are they tend to vary between being extremely sandy and in the really sandy mixes they flow really nicely, but it's hard to get things to grow in there, and you'll plant plants and then they die, and then there's mixes that are too um, not fast enough. So getting the right balance is a real good one. And I like to buy super loams, the contractor super loans, which go at about $30 a yard, and mix those with a good sand and some wood chips, and I found that those work very very well. So you'll see those mixes in there, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help.
Laura has
Okay.
a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, are there any situations where you might want to size to remove a certain percentage, like say you want to remove 100% of bacteria, or is it just always going to be sort of a better bang for your buck to do the more smaller BMPs?
It's a really good question, Allison. So I'm sorry, Allison, Laura. There is, yeah. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to quickly jump out and we're going to go back in to here. Got again. Oh, I'm going to swap. So this is a tenth of an inch up to an inch, and so if we so the different drivers in here are some areas that are that are mostly freshwater driven are kind of phosphorus based. So you might have phosphorus TMDLs. Other areas are nitrogen TMDLs. So you'd be more interested in what the nitrogen removal is. And then there are different standards in the MS4. So a lot of the MS4 standards, does anybody remember off the top of their heads what the numbers are that we're looking for? I feel like it's 80, 60, 50, but I can't remember. So 80 TSS, 60 nitrogen, 50 phosphorus is what they're looking for the retrofit standards. And so if it's 80, 60, 50, a 0.2 would get you you'd be in the 80, 60, 50 range. You'd be surpassing the 80, 60, 50 range. 0.1 would not. And um, and then so that's one simple reason. And then the other reason, Laura, is that it's always a safe bet to oversize things. So if you can, meaning you have the money and you have the space to oversize, what that just means is you're extending the life of the system, and you're probably reducing your maintenance intervals too. So, um, you know, I have no problem in designing systems for a 0.2 inch when we have limited budgets and you have a good sandy soil, because you can get such really good removal. But if I was showing you a hydrologic soil group D, these numbers are quite different. So you end up being pushed around a little bit more on some of those. So yeah, it's a little bit of just judgment call, and a lot of times it's budget driven, and you get what you can. We, as an example, one of the last BMPs we did, we did not have the budget to do the bigger system we wanted. We wanted to we wanted to capture the road runoff from a catch basin on the other side of the road that had a huge drainage area, and it was being captured through a current storm drain system. And so it had a huge drainage area and it was untreated. But we just simply didn't have the money, because it was going to we would have had to we would have had to trench across a road, right? So we had to pay for paving. Just that action alone added, like, I can't remember, it was 80,000 just to that price tag, just to get it across the road, even though the extra sizing of the BMP was inconsequential. It was like an extra $10,000 for the BMP sizing, but because we were tearing up road and all of that, it was and messing with sidewalk, it added over $100,000. Yeah, good question. Okay. Well, we're at 11:30. Let's give everybody an extra half an hour. Thank you for your time. And maybe BRPC and PVPC team, why don't you stay on a few minutes afterwards once we let everybody go?
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'll be sending out a follow-up email with the resources and contacts.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much for your time.